The night was frigid, with a wind that sliced through clothing like a blade, and snow falling so densely it veiled the streetlights, turning them into faint, hazy orbs. The blizzard had silenced the neighborhood, transforming bustling streets into desolate corridors of white. It was the kind of night when people stayed indoors, huddled near heaters, pretending the world outside ceased to exist. Daniel Carter stood in his cramped kitchen, watching his ancient microwave hum and rattle as it warmed his solitary dinner. The appliance, like everything in his run-down house, was older than it should have been. Peeling wallpaper, cracked tiles, windows that never fully blocked the cold. It was his, though, and it was quiet, a refuge from the rest of humanity. When the microwave pinged, Daniel retrieved the steaming soup container and set it on the scarred wooden table. He didn't bother with the dining room light. The kitchen's dim glow was enough. Shadows suited him, especially in winter, when memories seemed to crystallize in the icy air, much like the frost patterns on his windows. 5 years had passed since the war with the Valari ended, but for Daniel other battles persisted. He clung to routines, factory work by day, home by 6, dinner alone, maybe some reading, sleep by 10, repeat. He spoke only when necessary, kept his head down, and dodged curious stares or questions. It was easier that way. Neighbors had long since stopped trying to engage him, and he preferred their distance, their prying eyes, their whispered guesses about his past. Daniel blew on a spoonful of soup, watching the steam curl upward. Outside, the wind howled, rattling a loose window frame he'd meant to fix. Another task on an ever-growing list of repairs he never tackled. Why bother? The house served its purpose. It kept out most of the elements and all of humanity. The war had stolen more than lives. It had taken trust, hope, the ability to see strangers without suspicion. The Valari, with their deep blue skin and amber eyes, had become humanity's universal scapegoat, a focus for collective fear and rage. Even years after the peace treaties, the hatred burned hotter than during the war itself. Daniel rarely saw Valari anymore. Most had been herded into overcrowded refugee centers or sent back to the ruins of their homeworld. Those remaining on Earth lived in the shadows, hounded by government policies and vigilante citizen protection groups. Nightly news buzzed with debates about the Valari problem, politicians scoring easy points with promises of harsher restrictions. Daniel had stopped watching. He'd seen enough hatred to last a lifetime. The soup was bland but warm. Outside, snow piled against his door, and the old radiator clanked, struggling against the relentless cold. Another night of extra blankets loomed, another morning of waking to his breath clouding in the frigid bedroom air. As he rinsed his bowl in the sink, a sound cut through the storm's muffled silence. So out of place he thought he'd imagined it. He turned off the faucet and listened. There it was again, a faint but unmistakable knock. Daniel frowned. No one visited him, especially not in a blizzard. The microwave clock read 9:43 p.m. He considered ignoring it, probably kids pulling pranks or a neighbor with a misdelivered package. But a third knock came, more urgent, almost desperate. Sighing, Daniel dried his hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. He flicked on the porch light, its yellow glow reflecting off the snow-covered yard. Through the frosted window, he saw only swirling snowflakes. Unlocking the door, he opened it, and a blast of icy air stung his face. At first, he saw nothing but white darkness. Then, as his eyes adjusted, his breath caught. Half buried in snow on his doorstep was a small bundle wrapped in tattered cloth. Beside it, collapsed on one knee, was a Valari woman. In the harsh porch light, her blue skin looked nearly black, except where it had turned a sickly gray around her face. Her wide amber eyes, filled with fear and desperation, locked onto Daniel's. Her thin lips, purple from the cold, parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Instead, she made a weak gesture toward the bundle. Daniel's gaze shifted and his heart lurched. It was a baby, a Valari infant, its tiny face barely visible, its brighter blue skin framed by delicate, frost-dusted lashes. The woman let out a soft, choked sound, her trembling hand reaching toward Daniel without touching him. Her eyes held a plea more powerful than words. Then she slumped sideways into the snow. For a moment Daniel stood frozen, every instinct screaming to shut the door, call the authorities, stay uninvolved. Harboring undocumented Valari was illegal. His neighbors would report him. He could lose everything, his home, his freedom. But as he stared at the unconscious woman and the helpless infant, buried memories surfaced. Flames, screams, a hand reaching for help that never came. Before he could second-guess himself, Daniel stepped into the snow, the cold soaking through his socks. He lifted the bundled infant first, its surprising lightness a relief, still warm within its wrappings. Cradling the child, he saw its amber eyes flutter open briefly before closing again. Setting his jaw, he turned to the woman. She was taller than him, harder to move, but leaving her wasn't an option. Balancing the baby in one arm, he dragged her across the threshold, half carrying her inside. Kicking the door shut against the storm, he stood in the dim entryway, the weight of his decision crashing over him. The Valari woman lay motionless on his threadbare rug, snowmelt pooling around her. The baby stirred, making a small sound. "Okay," Daniel muttered to himself. "First things first." He needed to warm them. He carried the baby to the couch, cushioning it to prevent rolling, then turned to the woman. Her soaked clothing, a mix of Valari garments and ill-fitting human ones, clung to her. Her breathing was shallow, her skin icy. Gently he dragged her to the couch, propping her with pillows. He cranked the radiator to its maximum, then grabbed every blanket from the linen closet. When he returned, the woman's eyes were open, darting in panic until they found the baby. Only then did her fear ease slightly. As Daniel approached with the blankets, she tensed, her arm shielding the infant despite her weakness. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, unsure if she understood English. He held up a blanket, miming wrapping it for warmth. She watched warily, but didn't resist as he draped it over her shoulders and legs, then tucked one around the baby, ensuring its face was clear. "Can you understand me?" he asked slowly. After a pause, she gave a small nod. "Do you speak English?" Another, less certain nod. "What's your name?" She licked her dry lips, hesitating. Finally, in a voice so faint he leaned closer, she said, "Trey." "Trey," Daniel repeated. "I'm Daniel." Her eyes tracked his every move, wary as a cornered animal. He stepped back, but she made a distressed sound. "Please," she whispered, the word clearly difficult. "Help." "Ravi." She gestured weakly toward the baby. "Ravi, the baby's name?" Trey nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Food. Ravi needs." Realization hit Daniel. They were starving. He hurried to the kitchen, mind racing through his sparse pantry. What did Valeri eat? What could a Valari infant eat? He didn't know, but hunger was universal. He heated vegetable soup and found soft bread, not too stale, adding a glass of milk as an afterthought. Carrying it all on a tray, he returned to the living room. Trey had sat up straighter, Ravi cradled in her arms. Both watched him intently as he set the tray down. "I don't know what your people eat," Daniel said awkwardly, "but this is warm." Trey eyed the food suspiciously. Slowly, Daniel took a spoonful of soup, swallowing visibly, then ate a piece of bread. "See? It's safe." Only then did Troy reach for the soup, her hand shaking. Daniel steadied the bowl as she sipped. The moment the warmth hit her lips, her restraint crumbled. She ate ravenously, alternating between soup and bread, pausing only to offer tiny broth-softened pieces to Ravi, who took them eagerly. Daniel sat across from them, unsure what to say. Silence stretched, broken only by the sounds of eating and the house creaking against the wind. When the soup was gone and the bread reduced to crumbs, Trey looked up. Color had returned to her face, the gray tinge fading. She was still exhausted but more alert. "Thank you," she said, her voice clearer. Daniel nodded uncomfortably. "You should rest, both of you." As if on cue, Ravy yawned, revealing a mouth much like a human infant's, save for slightly sharper canines. "We go soon," Trey said firmly, though fear flickered in her eyes. "Not safe for you." "Go where?" Daniel asked before he could stop himself. "It's a blizzard. You nearly froze." Trey shook her head. "Others search for us." She hugged Ravy closer. "They find. They take Ravy." "Who's searching?" But Trey's eyes were drooping, exhaustion overtaking her. Ravy had fallen asleep, one tiny blue hand clutching Trey's hair. Deep purple, Daniel now noticed, not black. "Rest," he said gently. "You're safe tonight." As Trey's eyes closed, Daniel sank into his chair, the gravity of his choice sinking in. He'd invited Valari refugees into his home, an act that could land him in prison or worse if groups like the CSA found out. Yet, watching mother and child beneath his blankets, he couldn't regret it. Whatever had driven Trey to collapse on his doorstep must have been dire. Daniel knew something of fear, of running. It was etched in the lines around Trey's eyes, in the desperate way she held her child, a desperation he'd seen too often during the war. Outside, the storm raged, snow piling against the windows, the wind probing for weaknesses in the old house. But inside, for the first time in years, Daniel's home felt a little less cold. The morning dawned gray and muted, the blizzard having passed but leaving a world buried under feet of snow. Daniel, who'd dozed fitfully in his armchair, jolted awake at a sound. Trey was up, sitting upright on the couch, Ravy asleep in her arms. In the pale light, Daniel saw her more clearly. She was younger than he'd thought, mid-20s by human standards, though he didn't know Valari aging. Her angular features, high cheekbones, and straight nose gave her a regal air despite her exhaustion and fear. "Morning," Daniel said quietly, wincing as he stretched, his back protesting the awkward position. "Morning," Trey echoed, her voice careful. "How are you feeling?" She paused. "Better." "Warm." An awkward silence fell. Daniel had 1,000 questions, but didn't know where to start or if he had the right to ask. Instead, he said, "I'll make breakfast." In the kitchen, he prepared what he had: oatmeal, the last of his eggs, toast with the dregs of a jam jar. As he worked, he heard Trey moving in the living room, murmuring to Ravy in her native tongue, a melodic flow unlike anything Daniel had heard. When he returned with the food, Trey stood by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the snow-covered street. She'd draped a blanket around her shoulders like a cloak, her purple hair cascading in tangled waves. Ravy, awake now, was cradled in one arm, her amber eyes wide with curiosity. "Sorry," Trey said, stepping back as if caught. "It's okay," Daniel assured her, setting the tray down. "No one can see in with all that snow." Trey didn't look convinced, but sat on the couch, settling Ravy in her lap as Daniel served the food. This time, she didn't wait for him to taste it first, eating with the same desperate hunger as the night before. Ravy took small portions of oatmeal, cooing softly between bites. Finally, Daniel mustered the courage to ask, "What happened? Why were you out in the storm?" Trey paused, a piece of toast halfway to her mouth. She stared at it for a long moment, as if weighing how much to share. When she spoke, her voice was low, her English halting but clear. "We lived in refugee sector, East City. Bad place, not enough food, medicine, many sick, many angry." She glanced at Ravy, then continued, "2 days ago, men came. Not official, no badges, Just men with hate. Said all Valari must leave. Said we steal jobs, bring disease. Her voice hardened. They burned buildings. People ran. Some didn't run fast enough. Daniel's stomach twisted. He'd heard rumors of vigilante attacks on Valari enclaves, but the news rarely covered them, and when it did, the reports were sanitized. I took Ravi and ran, Trey went on. Tried to find help center, but they full. No room, they say, or they see me and shut door. Her amber eyes met Daniel's, defiant yet despairing. I walked hours in snow, knocking on doors. No one helps. Then your door. She looked at Ravi, now asleep again, tiny blue fingers curled into a fist. I thought I'd die, but Ravi must live. Maybe human take her in. The implications struck Daniel like a blow. She'd been ready to die on his doorstep if it meant saving her child. Why me? He asked quietly. Why my door? Trey's expression softened. Light, she said simply. Your house only one with kitchen light on, others dark, cold. That faint bulb above his sink, left on by chance, had made the difference between life and death. Before Daniel could respond, a sound outside made them freeze, the rumble of a vehicle crawling through the unplowed street. Trey was on her feet, clutching Ravi, eyes wide with fear. Daniel moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. A black SUV inched down the street, pausing briefly at each house. It wasn't police or official, but its deliberate pace sent a chill through him. Get away from the windows, Daniel whispered, stepping back. Go to the bedroom. Down the hall, first door on the right. Trey hurried out, Ravi pressed close. Daniel stayed by the window, watching the SUV approach his house. It stopped out front, engine idling. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought they'd approach. Then it moved on, continuing its slow patrol. He exhaled, but relief was fleeting. The SUV turned at the block's end and came back, this time on his side of the street. It stopped again, engine cutting off. Two men emerged, dressed in heavy winter gear, coats, boots, gloves, but their bearing screamed authority, or at least the belief in it. One was tall, broad-shouldered, with a trimmed beard and sharp eyes. The other was shorter, wiry, moving with nervous energy as they trudged toward his door. Daniel backed away, mind racing. Police, immigration, or worse, vigilantes hunting Valari. The knock was sharp, commanding, nothing like Trey's desperate taps. Taking a deep breath, Daniel opened the door partway, blocking the view inside. "Can I help you?" he asked, aiming for mild confusion. "Morning, sir," the taller man said, his smile cold. "Sorry to disturb you. We're with the Community Safety Alliance, checking on residents after the storm, ensuring everyone's okay." Community Safety Alliance. Daniel knew of them. One of the organized anti-Valari groups that had sprung up post-war, operating in a legal gray zone. Not sanctioned, but not stopped either. Many saw them as the government's unofficial enforcers. "I'm fine," Daniel said flatly. "Thanks for checking." He started to close the door, but the shorter man wedged his foot in. "Actually," the shorter man said, his voice high and unsettling, "we're also looking for someone, or someones." He pulled out a tablet, displaying a grainy image of Trey. Valari female, traveling with an infant. Witnesses saw her in this area before the storm hit. Daniel kept his face neutral. "Haven't seen her. Or any Valari, for that matter." The taller man leaned closer. "You sure? These illegals are desperate. Might break in, steal food. Could be dangerous, hiding in your shed or something." "My shed's locked," Daniel said. "And I'd notice if someone broke in." "Mind if we take a quick look?" the shorter man asked, already peering past Daniel. "For your safety, of course." "I do mind," Daniel said firmly. "You're with some community group. You don't have authority to search my property." The taller man's facade slipped, revealing something cold beneath. We're just trying to help, neighbor. These Valari aren't like us. Different biology, different diseases. That baby could carry alien pathogens. It's a public health issue. I appreciate the concern, Daniel said, irritation creeping in, but I haven't seen anyone, and I'm not interested in strangers searching my home. The men exchanged a glance. The shorter one started to speak, but the taller one silenced him with a hand on his arm. All right, the taller man said, his smile forced. Sorry to trouble you. If you see anything suspicious, here's our card. He handed Daniel a card with the Community Safety Alliance logo, a stylized shield, and a phone number. We're here to help. With a final glance into the house, they trudged back to their SUV. Daniel locked the door and watched through the window as they drove off. Only when they were out of sight did he breathe normally again. He found Trey in the bedroom, huddled in the corner, Ravi clutched to her chest, eyes wide with fear. They're gone, Daniel said. For now. Some tension left Trey's shoulders, but her fear remained. They look for us, the burning men. Daniel nodded grimly. I think so. They're from the Community Safety Alliance, CSA. Hunt Valari claim they're protecting humans. Trey's breath caught. CSA, she whispered, as if the name itself was dangerous. They hurt many. Daniel believed her. The taller man's cold detachment, the shorter one's eager tension, they weren't driven by duty or patriotism, but by something darker. They'll be back, he said, more to himself. They didn't believe me. Trey stood, her movements fluid despite her fear. We must go. Now they find us, they hurt you too. She was right. The CSA would return, likely with more men or a pretext to search. But sending Trey and Ravi back into the snow, hunted and helpless, was unthinkable. Where would you go? He asked. You said help centers turned you away. Trey's shoulders slumped. I hear rumors of ship for Valari. Take us to new colony, safe place. Her expression darkened. But I not know where, or if real. A colony ship. Daniel had heard whispers of such things, unofficial evacuations by sympathetic humans or the Valari government in exile. They'd be heavily guarded secrets, given the forces wanting to stop them. I have a car, Daniel said, surprising himself. If this ship exists, we can try to find it together. Trey stared, suspicion and surprise warring in her eyes. Why? This dangerous for you? It was a fair question, one Daniel couldn't fully answer. Why risk everything for two alien strangers from a race humans had recently fought? Maybe it was Ravi's innocence, or the echo of his own losses in Trey's desperation. Or maybe, after years of hiding, this was a chance to do something that mattered. Because it's right, he said finally. Not the whole truth, but true enough. Trey searched his face, then gave a single nod. Thank you, she said softly. Daniel turned to his closet, already planning what they'd need. We leave quick. Pack light, food, water, warm clothes. As he spoke, Ravi made a curious sound, drawing their attention. Despite the danger, Trey smiled at her child, a smile of fierce love that made Daniel's chest ache with an unnameable emotion. In that moment, watching them, he knew the risks ahead were worth it. Daniel moved efficiently, gathering essentials, a backpack for clothes and toiletries, a duffel for non-perishables, water, protein bars. He grabbed emergency cash from a lockbox under his bed, a first aid kit, blankets, and oversized coats for Trey. She helped despite her unfamiliarity with his things, her movements revealing a soldier's discipline that made Daniel wonder about her past. But there was no time for questions. The CSA could return any moment. My car's in the garage, Daniel said, zipping the last bag. Old, but it runs. We'll take back roads. Less chance of being spotted. Trey nodded, adjusting Ravi in her arms, the baby now wrapped in layers, her face barely visible. Where we go? She asked. Daniel hesitated. His plan was to get out of town, away from immediate danger. The ship was their only lead, but he had no idea where to start. "I know someone," he said finally. "An old friend from before the war, works with refugee groups now. If anyone knows about a ship, it's her." He hadn't spoken to Sarah in years, not since they'd fallen out over his withdrawal from the world. But if she was still the same, still passionate about her work, she might help. "How far?" Trey asked. "6 hours if roads are clear. Longer with snow." Daniel glanced outside. The street was empty, but that wouldn't last. "We need to go now." They loaded the bags into Daniel's aging sedan in the garage. The car sputtered in the cold, but started. The garage door opened to a snow-transformed world, drifts piled high. Trey settled in the passenger seat, Ravi secure in her lap, her posture tense as Daniel backed out. He left the garage door open, a sign of hasty departure, but they'd be gone before anyone noticed. The car fishtailed on the unplowed street, but Daniel, experienced in snow, kept it steady, eyes scanning for threats as they navigated the silent neighborhood. They were turning onto a clearer side street when Trey stiffened. "There," she said, voice tight. "Black car." In the rearview mirror, Daniel saw it, the same SUV turning onto their street blocks behind. Luck had them rounding a corner, briefly out of sight. "They must have been watching," Daniel muttered, accelerating as much as he dared on the slippery road. "Or checking the area again." Either way, it was too close. A chase in these conditions would end badly. His old sedan was no match for their vehicle. "Hold on," he said, veering down a narrow alley between houses. The snow was mostly undisturbed, with one set of tire tracks from an earlier traveler. Daniel followed them, masking his own. The alley led to a different street, away from town. Plows had made a pass here, easing progress. He kept his speed moderate, fast enough to gain distance, not enough to draw attention or risk a crash. Trey stayed silent, one hand on Ravi, eyes scanning. The baby was eerily quiet, as if sensing the need for stealth. For nearly an hour they wove through back streets and secondary roads, leaving town for the snowy countryside. Only when buildings gave way to fields and scattered farmhouses did Daniel relax slightly. "We're clear for now," he said, checking the mirror again. "But they might set up checkpoints on highways. We'll stick to smaller roads." Trey nodded, some tension easing. "You know these roads well?" "Well enough," Daniel said. He'd grown up in this region before college, before the war, before everything changed. They drove in silence, the heater's hum and the wiper's rhythmic swish, the only sounds. The gray sky promised more snow. Trey broke the silence. "Why you help us?" she asked, her tone less suspicious now, more curious. "Most humans hate Valari." Daniel kept his eyes on the road, hands steady. How could he explain what he barely understood? "I don't hate Valari," he said finally. "I don't hate anyone except maybe those who profit from hate." He paused, then added quietly, "And I know what it's like to lose everything, to be alone." Trey turned to him. "The war?" she asked softly. He nodded. "My wife, my daughter." The words felt strange, unused for so long. They were visiting her parents when the attack came. Collateral damage, they called it. He didn't need to specify which attack. The war was a blur of atrocities on both sides. Trey's expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "I lost many too," she said. "My bondmate, my parents, my city." Her arms tightened around Ravi, before Ravi born. Ravi had never known her father, born into a shattered world, her inheritance loss and fear. "I am sorry," Trey added, meeting his eyes briefly. "For your family." Daniel nodded, wordless. In 5 years, no one's condolences had felt real. But from Trey, who'd suffered similar losses at human hands, they did. They fell silent, each lost in memories. Outside, snow fell softly, flakes dancing in the headlights before melting on the windshield. After 3 hours on secondary roads, Daniel watched for a stop. They needed fuel, and both he and Trey needed a break. Ravi, asleep, would soon need feeding. A small gas station appeared at a rural crossroads, its faded sign advertising coffee and sandwiches alongside oil and wiper fluid. Daniel pulled up to a pump. "I'll get gas and supplies," he said quietly, not waking Ravi. "Stay in the car. Cover your face if anyone comes." Trey nodded, pulling a blanket higher to hide her blue skin and purple hair. Inside, the elderly cashier barely glanced up from his newspaper. Daniel grabbed water, sandwiches, coffee, candy bars, and juice he hoped suited Ravi. He added a road atlas, anticipating alternate routes if highways became risky. As the cashier rang him up, a TV in the corner caught Daniel's eye. A news channel, volume low, scrolled a chilling caption. "Authorities seek Valari fugitives linked to refugee center violence." Footage showed burning buildings, the attack Trey described, but the narrative blamed Valari extremists with suspects at large. "Terrible business," the cashier muttered, noticing Daniel's gaze. "Can't trust those blue devils. Should have sent them all back." Daniel made a non-committal sound, paying and gathering his items. As he turned to leave, 2 state police officers entered, bringing a gust of cold air. He nodded politely, heart pounding, but kept his pace steady as he returned to the car. Through the windshield, Trey watched the officers with terror. Daniel shook his head slightly, urging calm, as he loaded the supplies and started the engine. The officers hadn't followed, likely just grabbing coffee, but it was a stark reminder of their precarious situation. "We need to move," Daniel said. "The news is blaming Valari for the refugee center attack." Trey's face hardened. "Lies," she said. "Always lies." As they pulled onto the road, Trey gazed out the window at the sky. The clouds had thinned, revealing a single bright star. "Ver," she murmured. "My home." Daniel glanced at her, surprised. "You can see your star from here?" She nodded. "Always first star in your sky." Her finger traced its position, then moved. "Our colony there. New world where ship goes." The gesture hit Daniel hard, a mother showing her child worlds they might never see, homes lost and hoped for while fleeing a hostile planet. It felt profoundly human, their differences fading. They drove on, the snow glowing blue in the dusk. Ravi woke, fussed briefly, but settled after Trey fed her diluted juice. The baby's resilience struck Daniel. Children adapted, survived, because they had to.